You're in a jury seat and you take a look over at the defendant. His name's Nicholas Doone. His crime? Cheating. The sentence? Death. Do you convict? In this episode of Dark Margins, we break down Anne Doone from Gone Girl, written by Gillian Flynn in 2012. It's the most chilling portrait of calculated revenge in modern literature. Remember, in the first episode, we talked about Edmond Dantes, who waited 13 years and dismantled 3 lives with surgical precision. And then last episode, we talked about Medea, who burned everything down, including herself. Both of them were furious, and both of them made sure you knew it. But today, we're talking about something different. Someone who never once lost her composure, never raised her voice, never let you see it coming. She destroyed her husband so completely that, for a while, the whole country wanted him dead. Remember, you're the jury. By the end of the episode, I need the verdict. Now, Nick and Amy Doone have what looks like the perfect marriage. She's extraordinary. Literally, her parents wrote a series of children's books based on a fictionalized version of her called Amazing Amy. She grew up with the weight of the perfect fictional version of herself following her everywhere. Every milestone Amy missed, Amazing Amy achieved. Every stumble Amy made, Amazing Amy avoided. Now, think about what that does to a person. You spend your entire childhood being compared, not to other children, not to impossible standards, but to a version of yourself that never fails. Now let's talk about Amy's counterpart. His name's Nick. Nick's a writer. He's charming, attractive, the kind of man who's effortlessly likable in a room full of people. They meet at a party in New York, and the chemistry is immediate and real. They fall in love the way people do in the beginning, completely, recklessly, without looking at what they're actually building. And for a while, it works. Then, the money runs out. Nick loses his job. Amy's trust fund gets depleted. They move from New York to Nick's hometown in Missouri to care for his sick mother. And somewhere in that move, in that slow accumulation of compromise and disappointment, Nick checks out. He starts an affair with one of his students, a younger woman, uncomplicated, someone who sees the version of Nick he wants to be rather than the version he actually is. And Amy, oh, brilliant, perceptive Amy, the woman who grew up learning to read every room she ever walked into. Amy knows. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here's the case against Nicholas Doone. Count 1. He married a woman and then resented her for being exactly who she was. Amy was intense, precise, and demanding, but she was like that when he met her. He fell in love with those qualities and then punishes her for having them. Count 2. He checked out of the marriage without telling her. No conversation, no honesty. He simply withdrew. He left Amy performing a marriage alone while he was already emotionally somewhere else. Count 3. The affair. Not a moment of weakness, a sustained, deliberate relationship with a younger woman that he maintained for months while lying to Amy's face every single day. And the last count, count 4, when things got hard, financially, emotionally, geographically, Nick's response was to find somewhere else to be. He never once turned toward Amy and said, "This is hard and I'm struggling." He just left without leaving. This is not a good man making one terrible mistake. This is a man who slowly, consistently chooses himself over and over again while the woman he married watches and says nothing and waits. Prosecution at this point would rest. Now, the defense gets a chance, and here's where it gets complicated because the defense always has something to say too. They show Exhibit A that Nick's not a monster. He's weak, selfish, and dishonest, but those are human failings, not evil ones. He married someone he genuinely loved. He was overwhelmed by circumstances that he didn't know how to handle. Sure, he made terrible choices, but terrible choices made by a man who was drowning, not a man who's predatory. And Exhibit B's even worse. They point at Amy. Amy's not who she appears to be. Now, this is the part of Gone Girl that changes everything. Because Flynn gives us Amy's perspective directly, and what we learn is that Amy's been performing her entire life. The cool girl, the perfect wife, the amazing Amy who never fails. She constructed a version of herself that Nick would fall in love with, and when the performance became unsustainable, when real life crept in and she couldn't maintain it anymore, she didn't grieve the loss of the performance. She blamed Nick for witnessing it. And lastly, we get to Exhibit C. What Amy plans for Nick is not proportional to what Nick did. Nick had an affair. Nick was a bad husband. Nick was weak and dishonest, and yeah, he checked out, but Amy's response is to frame him for her murder, to construct a false narrative of abuse and terror, to be willing, genuinely willing, to let an innocent man be convicted and executed. Is that justice, or is that something else entirely? Now, the defense rests. You're the jury. Here's what Amy actually does, and I need you to understand this takes months of preparation. She begins keeping a diary, not a real diary, a constructed one, written backwards in time, carefully crafted to tell a specific story. A story of a marriage slowly curdling into fear. A story of a husband becoming controlling, then threatening, then dangerous. Every entry precisely calibrated, every detail designed to be found. She starts buying things, using Nick's credit card, items that make no sense for her to buy. Things that'll look suspicious in retrospect. She plants them, hides them, creates a treasure hunt of evidence pointing directly at her husband. Then she manipulates the people around her. She plants seeds of concern with neighbors and friends. She learns to say just enough, never too much, so that when the time comes, everyone around Nick will already be slightly afraid of him without knowing exactly why. She then withdraws money slowly, stages her own blood, practices. And on the morning of their 5th wedding anniversary, she disappears. She doesn't run away in a panic. She has a plan for where she goes, how she lives, how long she waits. She watches the investigation unfold on television from a motel room and adjusts her plan in real time as new information emerges. She's not a woman in crisis. She's the director. Now here is where Gone Girl does something Medea and Monte Cristo never did. It brings her back. Amy's original plan is to disappear permanently and let Nick face the consequences. But events don't unfold the way she anticipated. Nick goes on television and performs convincingly the grieving husband. He says the right things, he looks the right way. And Amy, watching from her motel room, falls for it. Not completely, not naively, but enough. So she pivots. She kills the man she's been hiding with, coldly, deliberately, in a way that makes her look like a victim. Then she comes home. She walks back into the house covered in someone else's blood, the grieving wife who survived, the nation that wanted Nick convicted now wants to protect her. And Nick, who knows exactly what she is, exactly what she did, exactly what she's capable of, can't say a word. Because who would believe him? She's already written the story. She's already decided how it ends. And it ends with her winning. So here's the question this episode's been building toward. When Amy Dunne walks back into that house, is she a victim or a predator? The honest answer, the psychologically accurate answer, is that she's both simultaneously. And that is what makes Gone Girl one of the most important pieces of literature of the last 20 years. Now think about it. Amy's grievances are real. Everything Nick did, the withdrawal, the dishonesty, the affair, the slow erasure of Amy's person from inside out, now that's genuine harm. Women experience exactly this kind of slow, invisible damage in relationships every day. Flynn wasn't inventing something fantastical. She was documenting something true. But here is what Amy does with that genuine harm. She doesn't heal from it. She doesn't leave. She doesn't confront it daily. She weaponizes it. She takes something real, her pain, her rage, her legitimate grievance, and she builds it into something that has nothing to do with justice anymore. She involves innocent people. She kills someone. She constructs an entirely false reality and forces everyone around her to live inside it. This is the psychological line that Gone Girl is really drawing. And that's that victimhood and predation are not mutually exclusive. A person can be genuinely wronged and become genuinely dangerous. We all know that the wound is real, but it's the response to the wound. That's where the moral question lives. And here's the most uncomfortable part. We admire her. Not fully and not without reservation. But there's something in the precision of Amy's plan, the intelligence, the patience, the absolute refusal to be dismissed or ignored that produces a reluctant, complicated respect. Now, everyone who studies behavioral psychology knows that we're wired to admire competence, even when that competence is directed towards something we know is wrong. And realize that Amy is extraordinarily competent. She's the most capable person in every room she enters, and our brains respond to that capability before our ethics catch up. But here's what Flynn's really saying underneath it all, and we'll get to Edmond Dantes and Medea here in a second, and it's the same thing that Amy wins. By every external measure, she wins completely. But she's trapped. She's trapped in a marriage she constructed as a weapon, trapped with a man who knows exactly what she is, trapped in a performance so complete that there's no longer a version of Amy Dunne that exists outside of it. So let's go back to the first two episodes real quick. Edmond Dantes walked away from his revenge with doubt, and that doubt was his humanity surviving. Medea had no doubt, and that certainty was the most disturbing thing about her. But Amy has something worse than both. She has a plan for what comes next. And that absolute forward momentum, that inability to stop is what Flynn is telling us about what rage does to a person when it has nowhere left to go. It doesn't burn out, it just finds a new target. And as we go, let's talk about Gone Girl for just a second. Gone Girl sold over 20 million copies. It's been adapted into a film, discussed in psychology classrooms, and argued about in relationships for over a decade. Because it isn't really about Amy and Nick. It's about all of us. If you want to read it, I'll link it in the description, and trust me, read it before you watch the film. Flynn's prose is where the real psychology lives. And next time, we go back further, much further, to a revenge so patient, so generational, so complete, that it doesn't just destroy one man, it destroys an entire house. If you know Greek tragedy, you already know what's coming, but if you don't, subscribe because this one will stay with you. I'm Bobby Garrison, and this is Dark Margins. I'll see you in the next chapter.